Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Therapist Couch session. So if you've ever attended the Business Travel Show in London in the past few years, you might recognize the name. This is a format that we've used at that show, and we've decided to put a virtual spin on the format for our inaugural Business Travel Show. And so while we've worked to set this session up so that only buyer attendees are able to access the session, because there is always sometimes a glitch with technology, I am going to just kindly ask that if any consultants or suppliers have found their way into this session, that you do exit and find one of the other 3 breakouts to attend during this time slot. So we're just trying to provide an environment where the buyers can be as comfortable and open as possible. So I thank you in advance for your understanding. This is also the first time we've tried a format like this, obviously in a virtual environment. So we do look forward to your feedback at the end of the session. There is a little clipboard icon at the bottom of your screen, and so you can fill out the survey at the end of the session either by clicking on that icon, or you'll be automatically redirected once the webcast actually ends. So my name is Jen Bankard, and I'm the Director of Content Solutions and Conferences for the BTN Group, and I want to spend just a few minutes reviewing the session format before I introduce our therapists. As I mentioned, this session is open to buyers only, and all of you are actually going to determine the content of the session. You're going to drive the content of what will be discussed over the next 45 minutes. We want to hear about what's keeping you up at night. Our therapists are going to listen to your woes and your challenges, and then they're going to provide you with some practical suggestions and advice to help you overcome those challenges. So no topic is off limits. You can share challenges you're having with your supplier partners or challenges you're having with your travelers or your internal stakeholders. Again, we encourage you to be as transparent as you are comfortable doing. Certainly, if it makes sense to reference specific supplier names, feel free to do so, but you don't have to. To take a turn on our virtual couch, this is the way it's going to work, is we're going to simply ask you to type a description of the challenge that you're having into the Q&A. So you should see a Q&A panel on your screen. Chat is the tab that's on the left part of the panel, and then the Q&A is immediately to the right of that. You're not going to be sharing your challenge verbally, nor will you be on camera. You'll simply be typing in your information. Please do let me know if it's okay to at least share your first name as I describe your challenge to our therapists. We might ask you for some additional information or sort of clarification so that our therapists can provide you with the best advice possible. And our hope is that we'll have enough time to give at least 3 or 4 of you time on our virtual couch today. So if you need any clarification on the instructions I've just provided, please go ahead and type that into either the chat or the Q&A, and I will clarify after I introduce our therapists for the sessions. So first up, we have Rosemary Maloney, who is the Global Travel Lead for Sprinklr. So Rosemary, can you share with us where you're broadcasting from today? And since this is a therapy session, if you wouldn't mind sharing just one example of sort of one thing that you've been doing for self-care over the past months, because we know that self-care is really important in a time like this.
Definitely, Jen. Thank you for having me today. We're on the Jersey Shore, not the Jersey Shore, other parts of it. And I've been doing a lot of reading and sitting out on the porch for my self-care.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rosemary. So next up, we have Nikki Parsons, who's a consultant with Festive Road, and she's currently actually serving as the outsourced travel manager to Arcadis. So Nikki, where are you coming to us from today, and what's one thing that you've been doing for self-care over the past few months?
Well, you might be able to tell from my accent that I'm calling from just outside London. And for me, the last sort of couple of months has been made bearable by a lot of time on my spin bike. So that's kept me sane over the last few months.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nikki. And finally, we have Kathy Sharp, who's the Director of Global Travel Operations and Expense Management Services at ITW. So, Kathy, where are you joining us from today? And tell us a little bit about some self-care you've been doing over the past few months.
Well, thank you, Jen. Thanks for having me. And I am calling in from Lake Gaston, North Carolina. And so the lake has been therapy. But full disclosure here, I too have been doing spin bike like Nikki. Although you said for self-care, you didn't say successful self-care. So you can see that I have got into the quarantine over the last few months. But I am trying. I've been on my bike and listening to instructors and doing everything from Broadway to hip hop and trying to give it a go. So
fantastic. Well, hey, you're making the effort and you're getting those endorphins going, and that's what really matters. So,
right.
Well, thank you. Thanks to all three of you and attendees. You can read more about each of our therapists by clicking on the abstract icon on the bottom of your screen. So just want to do a quick check to see if anyone needs any clarification on instructions. But it actually looks like we've got quite a few questions coming in already, which is a good sign. But we thought we'd actually, before we get to your challenges, start out with just a quick poll question, just to do a little temperature check of the audience. And Josh, I might need you to help me out here. I'm trying to pull up my poll question. So if I could maybe ask you to help push that out. So we would like to know from all of you what topic is sort of most top of mind for you right now. Is it travel policy changes? Is it hotel RFP season? Is it just dealing with the whole like return to office, return to travel? Thank you so much, Josh. Is it your post-COVID supplier relationships, or is there something else that's really top of mind? And if there is, you can certainly put those questions into the chat. So I'm going to give everyone just a few more seconds to put those responses in. And so certainly if there's any questions that come in, this is just a way for you to know that you're not the only one who is dealing with this particular issue at this time. All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and push the poll results out. So Josh, if I could ask you to do that, that would be fantastic. All right, so it looks like the majority of you, 44%, return to office, return to travel is top of mind, and I think that makes sense. And then followed by that, certainly hotel RFP season, right? It is that time of year, and so I know we've got a great session on hotel later on the agenda, so you might want to check that out. Obviously, post-COVID supplier relationships, lots of people are navigating that as well, along with travel policy changes. So that seems to be what's top of mind. Just looking at the Q&A, someone sharing unused tickets is a big challenge, absolutely. And then someone else is saying outside of normal travel concerns, the biggest thing on my mind is how do I stay relevant while travel demand is low? So Robert shared that, and Robert, I think that's an excellent question, and it actually connects to one of the questions that's been submitted that I think we'll start with is, during this pause in travel, I think what we've been hearing from a lot of folks in the past couple months is this has really been an opportunity for travel to get that seat at the table and for travel managers to demonstrate their value to the C-suite. So how do you demonstrate your value, but also how do you then get your C-suite to buy into the travel program? So Kathy, I'm actually going to start with you because and then maybe have Rosemary jump in a little bit. Kathy, I know you've had lots of opportunities to engage with your C-suite over the years, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Laurie's the one asking, so Laurie and Robert are the two sort of asking these questions. So what advice would you have for them?
Well, Robert, Laurie, I think for myself, what I have found is that duty of care has risen to the top of my executive time. You know, they're very, very concerned about getting back to travel. They are very concerned about the health and safety of the employees. And it's allowed us to really highlight what our partners can do as far as duty of care. We brought a number of different things to the table, communication processes that allow for more detailed information about safety that our suppliers have detailed, um, whether it be cleanliness, different like protocols that established in their organizations, and it's been very helpful. Uh, I feel like everybody else, if there's no travel, there may be no me. But I firmly believe that there will be travel. I think that we as leaders wrap our heads around how to make our organizations comfortable with the new normal and find a path to getting our folks back on the road. I think that our suppliers are doing a lot of all the right things that they need to do, and I think we can impact what they're doing moving forward to help us to help them.
Thanks, Kathy. And Kathy, just keep an eye on the chat. I don't know, we might want to switch your audio. I know it's going in and out, so just see what Josh has to offer you with that. Rosemary, can I ask you to jump in and share some of your thoughts on how to sort of demonstrate your value and how to get the C-suite to buy into travel?
So I started at Sprinklr on February 18th of this year, which was great when you consider that we all went home on March 11th and haven't been back since. So within 3 weeks of starting as their global travel lead, we went into a travel ban. So one of the things that I found was not only showing the importance of our travel program through duty of care and reporting, I also started to raise my hand for other things, making sure that they know that even though my focus has been travel and expense for most of my career, I can help with other processes and reporting. And so I've kind of helped to make myself a little more valuable beyond just travel. One of the most important things that I've also found is so much of our reporting previously wasn't in depth. So providing those more in depth and strategic reports to the C-level has really helped to raise my profile within the company, only having been there such a short time.
Great. Thanks for that, Rosemary. All right. So another topic that has come in, and this is interesting because I was moderating a session a little bit earlier today on the topic of online booking tools. And we know that there's an interesting relationship between online booking tools and the TMCs. And so we had a question come in from Ashley. She's saying the OBT and the TMC are always pointing fingers at each other. And it seems that, the OBT always says it's the TMC's fault, and the TMC always says it's the OBT's fault. So I'd love to find out from one of you what advice you might have to offer in terms of, this is a partnership, right? And it's not just a partnership between the travel manager and the OBT and the travel manager and the TMC. It's all three of those players, as well as many other partners. Really that relationship is so important. So Kathy, what words of advice would you have for Ashley in terms of how we can maybe stop the finger pointing and actually engage in some meaningful conversation between the OBT and the TMC?
So, Ashley, the first thing that I would do, if at all possible, and I know that it's not always possible, but the first thing that I would ask is to get everybody seated at the table at once. And take it beyond your account manager, take it directly into the area of problem that you're seeing. I'm not sure what it is, but ask for some specific technical resource from each of their platforms. I think that the story changes dramatically when everybody is sitting together versus he said type of dialogue, and you never really get to the real, problem and what's the source of the problem. So that's my first recommendation. Um, the other thing I would say is document everything. So when you see that there's a problem, screenshot every single detail of it. And again, when you communicate in a three-way prong, make sure that you've got your OBT and your TMC on all of those communications. And that way they can't blame each other. They have to try it and work it out. And sometimes there's not a workout. I found anyway that there's been certain things that we just never seem to get down to the bottom of it, but it has changed the dynamic of how we all work together and really, really one another.
Great. And one thing that might be helpful, and Ashley, if you're comfortable, I don't know if you want to send in any sort of additional detail in terms of like what are maybe some of the specific issues that are causing the finger pointing, and that might also be able to help us provide some additional level of detail. I do think, Kathy, we're going to switch you over to the phone bridge. So we're going to lose you on camera, but I think we're going to be able to hear you a little bit better.
Jen, I just moved closer. Did this help at all that I've moved closer?
Now it does seem better. So maybe just stay right there and don't move, and then we should be good.
I won't move.
All right. We'll try that for a few more minutes. And then, if need to, we'll switch. So I want to kind of, switch over to a different topic. And then if we hear some more from Ashley, we can always go back to this. Want to just talk about, again, so a lot of travel managers have been using this time where there's either no travel or reduced travel. I know that the Festive Road team is refers to it as the pause in travel. And so a lot of travel managers have said, let me use this time to really tackle some projects that have been on the to-do list, but I haven't had time to get to it. And now I do. The challenge is that if it's a project that involves perhaps a TMC or another technology supplier, is a lot of those consultants are now on furlough or gone, right? I think we all have had, friends and colleagues in the industry who unfortunately have been furloughed or lost their jobs. Which is, it's so hard to, I know I go on LinkedIn almost every day, and it's so hard to read those notices, but at the same time, it's really, I think, putting a strain on some of the travel managers because they're just not able to then push these projects along. Nikki or Rosemary, would either of you have any suggestions for what someone can do if they want to tackle a project, but the resources needed to help them are not available? Rosemary, can I start with you?
Yeah, I'm happy to
Oh, go ahead, Nikki. Great.
By all means.
No, Nikki, go ahead. It's fine.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Look, I think, this certainly happened. This certainly happened to me. I joined Arcadis and started working just as we went into lockdown. So kind of by default, everything I've done has been in this unusual time for us. And we really had a lot of foundational work that we wanted to do in the program whilst people weren't traveling so much. So really, I sat with a long list of projects that I knew you wouldn't normally have time to do because you were run ragged with operational concerns every day. And I really then just tested it out with the various suppliers to see who was available, who had the resources and who didn't, and either put stuff on the back burners or realized that the timelines were going to have to be adjusted, and then really pushed forward with the ones that I could do. And then, again, I think where you can work with those suppliers, it's definitely to mutual benefit because, we all want to try and prove, our value during this time. And I think if you can partner with those suppliers to find that project that is going to make everybody look great and give you some great exposure to C-suite, then that's kind of a win for everybody. So That hasn't worked with every project, but I think we have found some really good sort of foundational projects where that's been successful.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Nikki. Rosemary, anything to add?
Similar to Nikki, I just kind of put a list together of projects that needed to be done and just kind of check them off as I needed to. As far as the technology piece of it, in any case where I could Google something, that's what I did. And if I hit a total roadblock, then that project got moved to later this year when resources are available.
Fantastic. All right, so we had a question come in from Beverly, and she is saying that the challenge she's having is making sure her travelers actually pay attention to book travel and catch errors in a timely manner. She says she's good, but she's only human, and so to handle, and this is really pre-COVID, so handling, 100 plus people for weekly travel, that's a lot. So I guess the question is how can, and Beverly, jump in if I summarize this incorrectly. What I'm sort of taking from this is how can we communicate with and educate our travelers better to set them up for success so that they are not making as many errors. Kathy, can I start with you on this one?
I lean on my TMC for that. You want to make sure that, first of all, well, let me step back for a minute, because the TMC, when they're verbally in conversation with one of your travelers, that's one story, right? They should be recapping everything, and hopefully your travelers are listening. But your travelers should be getting a free copy of anything that's going to be ticketed when they're going through the OBT. And I think that's just, tips and Travel Smarter. We have a Travel Smarter page on our intranet that just goes through Q&A and details of things that travelers should do. And we try to direct our travelers to that all the time. We're even doing that on our mobile app now, giving them helpful hints that make them more productive, make things more accurate, and make them more responsible for what they are booking and what's being ticketed, so that we don't have to deal with the aftermath of what's happened. And in saying that, on the expense side of things, if your traveler has a problem and they don't deal with what happened, and they can't get it expensed, then they won't do it again. So that's a really quick way to catch the cat. Just say, hey, look, you're not, we're not going to be able to do anything for you, so you need to figure this out yourself. They won't do that again. They will pay more attention to what they're doing.
Great suggestion. I know we often talk about that carrot versus the stick approach, and I think every once in a while you got to go with the stick, right? If you want to change.
I do believe that you have to empower your travelers. In our travel policy, we are very reasonable about what we tell our travelers, what they can do and what they can't do. But ultimately, they're responsible for their budget, and they're responsible when they make a mistake, unless we made the mistake. If we made the mistake, our travel counselors made the mistake, it wasn't ticketed appropriately, whatever the case may be, the hotel made an error, who knows what, we'll fix that. But we kind of we'll give you one shot, but next time, don't keep coming back to me on this, because it's a waste of our time, it's a waste of your time, and ultimately it's a waste of the company's money. So, they have to be responsible, just like they would for anything else that they're handling from a business perspective. If it's one of their sales deals, they're going to make sure the numbers are right, so.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's switch over for a few minutes and talk about, I I think the thing that came in number 2 on our poll was hotel RFP season. So Rosemary, I'm going to throw this one over to you because I know that talking about hotel rates is one of your favorite topics. I might have said that with just a hint of sarcasm. So the question is, dynamic rates for 2021 are being encouraged. So while rates are lower now, if travel resumes to 2019 rates in 2021, I expect rates will increase substantially, which with dynamic pricing would prevent forecasting travel spend. So just what are your thoughts? Like, let's just talk rates. What are your thoughts on this, Rosemary? Everyone's struggling with it right now.
Oh, I don't know anyone who's not. One of the biggest things I always like to put forward is it's a relationship between you and your supplier. And having a good partnership there means we can say, right now, we know you don't have the bandwidth to do a static rate for the next year. Let's do a dynamic program and revisit it either every quarter or every 6 months and see how things are going in those cities where we may need it. You know, we may need a static rate at Q4 in New York City again next year, which would be great if we could have that. But I unfortunately don't think we're going to be back up to our 2019 levels in 2021. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news for other people, or hopefully I'm wrong. I'm really hoping I'm wrong. But keeping those conversations open and making sure that you are being a reasonable partner. You know, me taking a dynamic rate now means that when when we need the help, that hotel will come to us and give us a rate that's the right rate for our program. So it's always that, you know, partnerships help with those kind of conversations.
Great, thanks for that.
Jen, can I tag on a little bit to what Rosemary just said?
Absolutely.
I think this, from a buyer perspective, and I think this has to be managed within your own organizations, but the travel industry and our suppliers, you know, that we've loved to squeeze, you know, and get the best rates from all of these years that we've enjoyed that party of sort, they are in desperate need right now. And we have to do everything we possibly can, really, to keep our programs consistent and at good price points, but still understand that hotels are closing, many hotels every single day now. We're going to end up with not only smaller air partners, but we're going to end up with less air partners. Car rentals, same situation. And so when you're thinking about really, you know, taking a hard stand on rates at the moment, I would ask you guys all as buyers to pause. And that's a buyer to a buyer, saying that to try and help them to get through this so that we do have a competitive environment in 5 years. Because if we don't, it will end up at higher costs anyway, because there will be less, and less always equals more, you know, when it comes down to a competitive landscape. So that's just my two cents on it. I know I've been talking to a lot of fellow buyers about, are you doing a hotel RFP this year? What stance to take, etc. But I would encourage you guys all to look at it and remember that they are our partners, and we want to have partners, you know.
Yeah, no, I think that advice was worth much more than 2 cents, and I think that's what, you know, a lot of us are really trying to navigate right now. Those relationships that everyone has, those relationships, those partnerships, they've changed, and we're having to potentially make some concessions now that will pay off down the road, right? We want these relationships to succeed in the long term. The entire industry has been, I'm not saying anything that anyone doesn't already know, but, you know, we've been hit really hard. and that's provided challenges, but it's perhaps also provided some opportunities. And so I want to kind of continue with this theme of supplier relationships and shift over to the TMC side, because we've had a few questions come in related to this. And Nikki, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with you on this topic. So two parts, and feel free to address whichever one you're most comfortable with. So one of our buyers wrote in that they are finding that their TMC, has lost so much business that if they don't have a dedicated agency in the country, that they're wanting to pull back to just doing everyday bookings. The buyer needs more than this, and as travel continues to increase, they can't have the services decline, right? They can't have that level of service go down because their travelers need that level of service. So the buyer absolutely recognizes that the TMCs are hurting so much right now, but they also need the services they expect. So I guess all of that to say is the first question is how do you balance that, right? How do you balance understanding that the TMCs are struggling right now with the fact that some travel is starting to increase, so your travelers need that support? And so then a follow-up would be, if you decide to change TMCs during this time when travel itself is very limited, how can you really assess whether or not you're making a good choice? So what would sort of that process look like to identify if you want to make a change? So Nikki, do you want to try and tackle some of that?
Sure. Okay. I would just say I echo what the fellow panelists have said about the hotel RFP as well. We're certainly tackling it in phases, and it's a review and a right size, but really trying to reinforce that partnership and make sure it works for everyone. But yes, let's tackle this TMC one. So I guess two parts to that. Look, I think this is probably common for anyone managing particularly a global program where you don't have the critical mass in country. With the TMC, you probably have seen that service change where staff are on furlough. And look, I think certainly what I've done in most recently is just have a very frank conversation with senior leadership at the TMC and be as candid as I can about what I'm expecting to see in terms of the volumes coming back. I'm really working with them to understand how their furlough schemes are working. When are their staff coming back? Have you got other agency staff you can to bring in to support? Can we tap into all those sort of conversations? If you're really expecting to see those volumes come back and you need increased support, it's in their best interest to help you with that. So I think it's a sort of help me to help you conversation, and see how you can find that middle ground. And I think just keep going higher and higher in the TMC till you get someone who can have that really strategic conversation with you, because they really should be very keen to hear from anybody who wants more from them, and that where they can show that they're delivering value. So certainly I think I've had reasonable success with that, but it is challenging in some markets more than others.
Great, thanks for that, Nikki.
And then I guess in terms of changing TMC, changing TMCs, look, I think this is a very individual decision. Is there a right and wrong time to go to RFP? Not really. I think, yes, the volumes are going to be a challenge, but people are also very keen for business. So if you're very clear on what you want to achieve with an RFP, there might be some value in doing it. I think it's going to be very specific to what you anticipate travel to come back looking like. I mean, certainly where I'm at right now with Arcadis, we've actually traveled all the way through lockdown because they work in the construction industry. So actually it wouldn't be a terrible time. We have a sense of what our travel would look like and what our sort of new volumes would look like in the new normal. And so therefore it might not be a crazy time for us to do that. But I think that's going to be very individual, is my sense of it.
Would you see, Nikki, any advantages to changing TMCs during this time when perhaps there is reduced travel? I mean, I've heard from some travel managers that, some of the advantages have been like they have felt like they've actually been able to take their time, whereas other times they maybe feel rushed to do an implementation because you're doing it in the midst of everything else that's going on, or that they've been able to do, I don't know, any training that might go along with making a change in supplier partners, or changes in communication strategies to your travelers, now is the time to do it because you actually have time. Do you see any additional advantages to making a change like this during this time?
I think maybe there's another spin on it, and I think something that would feel a really good use of time right now is just making sure you stay close to what's going on in the market and what all the various different TMCs are doing, and making sure you know each other. I think we would all agree that if two parties come to the table who know each other well, you're going to have a more successful RFP anyway. And there's a lot of sales folks who are really happy to get on the phone at the moment and do a lot of Zoom calls with you and get to know your program and get to know you and your objectives. So, it feels like that's perhaps a really good use of the time, is to start, bolstering some of those relationships and making sure you're aware of what everybody's doing in the marketplace. What tech is being advanced in the meantime? How does that fit with your new sort of digital view of the world? And that feels like a really good use of the time, certainly.
Great, thanks, Nikki. Rosemary, I think you wanted to add a little bit to just this whole TMC conversation.
Well, I will only say that I've worked pretty much with the same TMC for the last 15 years through various companies. So when I got here and saw the contract that Sprinklr had and saw it wasn't what I think it should look like, I reached out to the team that I worked with through Tapestry and working for them and IAC, and said, hey, we need to talk about this. And we've been working on making sure the pricing is now competitive and right for the size of the program that it is now.
Great, so definitely benefiting from that prior experience that you had.
Yes, definitely. And like I said earlier, partnership is always important. You will find ways to work with people when you get to new places, if they're the right people to work with.
Fantastic. And Kathy, did you want to add anything into this TMC conversation?
Just a couple words of caution. If you are venturing into a change and you're going to go to an RFP, make sure that the TMCs that you are looking at are on sound footing from a financial perspective, because there has been a tremendous amount of lost business through the last 8 months. And then the other thing I would say is ensure that they have the proper implementation structure available, because there's been so many folks that have been furloughed, because I've been hearing it from a number of different sources, people that were already teed up and making the change, and then their implementation teams have been furloughed, and things have come to a screeching halt. That could cause big problems, for you within your organization. And then the other thing is really the landscape is going to change dramatically within the next 3 to 6 months. Again, so be very, very careful about who you're partnering with. Better, I won't say that all we're in a buyer only session, but better the neighbor versus moving into the house and not knowing if the people that you're going to live next to are going to keep you up all night.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. So I want to actually just make a comment. So, Ashley, who had written in earlier about sort of the OBT and the TMC finger pointing, did give us a little bit of additional context. It was actually around applying unused tickets. And I actually just have to thank our audience, because I'm seeing that there is a very active chat that's been happening among the group related to how everyone's been managing unused tickets. So I just want to thank all of you for helping each other out and providing suggestions. is actually just related to if we went back to the poll question, the one that was most top of mind for folks was return to office and return to travel. And so one of our buyers wrote in that she's feeling overwhelmed thinking about the steps that need to be taken to get back to travel. I feel that it will be quite the undertaking and want to be proactive. So what are other approaches that companies are considering to begin this process? So I think this is a great one that if folks want to share some suggestions in the chat for how they have tackled the return to travel process and how they've been proactive and what considerations they've taken into account. But I want to check in with each of our three panelists. And again, knowing that each of your companies are sort of at different places in regards to return to travel. And we know too that there's a lot of resources out there for the buyer community. And I think I would be remiss just because they have, if I didn't mention it, but because they have made it publicly available, regardless of whether or not you are a customer. But Festive Road, of course, has put together their permissible travel framework that a lot of buyers have reported to have found to be very helpful. So Nikki, I'll just start with you in terms of maybe what's your top, one or two pieces of advice when it comes to being proactive with tackling return to travel.
Start planning. Don't underestimate kind of the work behind it. It isn't overwhelming when you get into it, I promise. Just take a framework that resonates with you and start asking some really good questions internally and get that senior management engagement now. But start early. I think that's the one bit of feedback we've seen across a whole range of customers is we wish we'd started earlier.
Great. Thanks, Nikki. Kathy, advice you would have to tackle return to travel?
Yeah, so Jen, I would say, as just add on to what Nikki was saying, just to say the cross-functional dialogue is very important within your organization, working with your HR, your risk, of course, your executive leadership. Ensure that your sponsor is communicating upward to, the C-suite to ensure that they understand what is going on from your perspective, and your perspective should be gathered through many different relationships that hopefully you're making. You invested your time in this business travel show today. None of us have the right answers. All of our organizations are different, but we all know one thing, that it starts at the top. So you want to make sure that you are feeding upward any information that can help them to make the best decisions possible for your organization. And really anything that having to do with confidence, I think is ultra important, because I think right now the reason we are not traveling is not because our suppliers have not done necessary steps to ensure safety and healthy well-being when we're utilizing their products. It's really the lack of confidence. What I say, it's the bookend. It's before you get on the trip and after you take that trip. Once you get to wherever you're going, what are you going to do then? This is what's keeping executives up all night. It's the restaurants, it's ground transportation. So anything that you can give them that can help them to make better decisions on what's good for your organization, I think that helps you, and it also increases your value within the organization. Tremendous.
Great.
Really.
Awesome. Thanks, Kathy. And Rosemary, any advice from you?
I will just echo what Nikki and Kathy have said before me. Get started now. It's very easy to, I used the framework that was set up by Festive Road. Not everything applied to me, but I thought it gave me a good thought for questions I might not have thought of. So I do recommend, for buyers who haven't started, to use that as a way to get started. And what, I've done is I put together like 5 or 6 different scenarios on how we could open travel and what makes sense with our different markets and different areas, and provided them all up to my leadership. And, we're still kind of in phase 1, no matter which one we're in. So it works that we have all the different ways it could play out.
Great. Well, believe it or not, 45 minutes has flown by. Ladies, Rosemary, Kathy, Nikki, I want to thank the 3 of you for sharing your time and your expertise today. But I also really want to thank all of our attendees, first of all, for going with us on this journey. That was a bit of an experiment for a session format. And I'm so thrilled that so many of you have engaged in the chat feature and, again, shared suggestions and ideas with each other. Take advantage. I know this is the time at a conference where people would be like hanging out in the back of the breakout room, having those sidebar conversations once the session ends. And so while we can't do that in person, I would encourage you to reach out to each other, connect with each other on the mobile app, or connect with each other on LinkedIn, or head over to the virtual lounge. But try and still take an opportunity to network and meet some new friends. So please do give us your feedback on the session. Again, little icon with the clipboard. With that said, we now have a break in expo time, and our closing general session will begin at 4 p.m. Eastern. So thanks again. Enjoy the rest of the show, and we can go ahead and close out the webcast.
Thanks, Jen.
Bye. Thank you.